Yo, party people number 2. Okay, so I don't even know if that will take because I did 10 minutes and 9 seconds. I think you can do longer videos now. Okay, so we're in Revelation chapter 8, the very last trumpet, the fourth trumpet. So let me just read it to you. Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. And I looked, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels who are about to sound. Okay, so I was covering this first section when the fourth angel sounded, a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, that a third of them were darkened, a third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. So the readings, the commentaries had us go back to see where other places where this was seen. And so we've already looked at Exodus 10:21. So this was during Moses's preparation to take them out of Egypt into the promised land, right? So there were all of these plagues. One of the plagues was darkness. But what was interesting is when you read the plague of darkness, so this is, and they're saying that this is similar here because this is God moving on nature, right? All throughout those plagues, it was God moving on nature. But what happened right after the plague of darkness? Right after the plague of darkness was the plague of the death of the firstborn. And not only the death of the firstborn, they put of course, you know the story where they put the blood on the doorposts, and then the Passover was instituted. So what's so crazy is when we're doing this study in Revelation, so many times when they're referring us back to see where these other things are happening that are very similar, many times the very next section is a prophecy about Jesus, or what do you call it? Like a picture of Jesus prophetically, right? And so this is no different. So this is in the book of Exodus after the days of darkness. What happens? The death of the firstborn, which is of course symbolizes Jesus. Symbolize the blood on the doorpost is Jesus. The Passover is Jesus. So that's just powerful. And so you see it there, and they're referring you back to that. And then I just was reading in Isaiah chapter 30 where I showed you on the map. Here's Isaiah, just real quick. So here's Isaiah. He's prophesying to them right before the fall of right during the fall of the northern kingdom, and then he's prophesying to King Hezekiah down here before, as things are starting to go bad down south as well. And he's telling them, and a lot of his prophecy is referring to Egypt. Many times in the Old Testament, you're seeing God correct Israel because they constantly were going back to Egypt for safety and for security and for military protection. And God was always correcting them. Don't do it. Rely on me. I took you out of Egypt. Don't go back to Egypt, right? And so this is no different. So in this prophecy, when there's a prophecy of blessing if they follow God and if they honor God, and all these things that are going to happen, and it's prophetic because it's also speaking about the future when these things do happen, right? But right before this section in Isaiah, he's calling them out for relying on Egypt. So again, there's this whole Egypt reference. And then right after the blessing in chapter 30, Isaiah 30 verse 26 is the exact blessing, but that whole section from 18 on to 30 to 26 is the blessing for following God. So not rely on Egypt, to not rely where he took them out of, the place of darkness and all of the slavery and the all that represents, but to rely on God and the blessings that would follow for doing that. And then of course chapter 31, which follows that, is him giving them a hard time again and telling them don't go to Egypt, trusting God, right? So let me just read to you this section in Isaiah that they're referring to here in the commentaries that shows what the blessing would be, wherein it shows here in Revelation when it talks about the dimming of the sun and the dimming of the moon. That's a reversal of this blessing, and this is the one that they're talking about. So after it talks about all the great things that God will be gracious to them, he will exalt them, have mercy on them, because he's the God of justice. In verse 23, it starts talking about the physical blessings of them turning back to God. It says, so this is Isaiah 30, verse 23. Then he will give the rain for your seed with which you sow the ground, and bread of the increase of the earth. It will be fat and plentiful. In that day your cattle will feed in large pastures. Likewise the oxen and the young donkeys that work the ground will eat cured fodder, which has been winnowed with the shovel and fan. There will be on every high mountain and on every hill rivers and streams of water, in the day of the great slaughter when the towers fall. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold as the light of 7 days, in the day that the Lord binds up the bruise of his people and heals the stroke of their wound. So that is absolutely prophetically speaking of the future, right? Not only of them, symbolic of what they will encounter and how they will live. In a version of that at that time if they will turn back to God, but it's also very symbolic for what's coming, right? For the coming of Jesus, right? And so then the other section that they refer you back to is Jesus' own words. So they refer you back to Jesus. And of course, Matthew chapter 24, which is awesome because all of 24 is him prophesying about the end days and what's coming upon the earth prior to his coming again. So it says, let me find chapter 24. It was actually verse 29, 30. So I'll start with 26, but all of 24 is good because it's Jesus' words describing what's going to happen. 24, 26 says, therefore, this is Jesus speaking, so it's all in red. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, meaning Jesus is in the desert because it's capitalized. Do not go out or look. Do not go out, or look, he is in the inner rooms. Do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. And wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Then 29 says, immediately after the tribulation of those days that he just talked about, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. All right, so that's a good ending. All right, so we're going to stop there. Other than that, verse 13, I looked and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven. This is back in Revelation. Saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound. So this is something that sounds like it can be heard, like it can't, like everyone's going to hear this. And it's a warning for what's about to come. So as bad as the first four trumpets were, what's coming is going to be even worse. An interesting side note is they were saying that the language of this word for the angel can also be interpreted eagle, and they weren't sure if this was because of a scribal error, but they were saying that something about it also representing an eagle, which is interesting. So anyways, that's all I had for you today. Jesus is coming. Read your Bible. Peace.